In 2011, Anurup and Sagarika Bhattacharya, an Indian couple who were residing in Norway, made an emotional plea to Indian authorities, desperately seeking help in bringing their children back home. The couple's children, Abhigyan and Aishwarya, had been confiscated by the Norwegian Child Welfare Services in May of that year on the grounds of neglect and emotional disconnect between the mother and her kids. This event marked the beginning of a 2 year period of chaos and grueling custody battles.
These last 8 months are like the worst and worst of nightmares.
This is
We have
a
so
terrible
many
situation in
sleepless
our
nights.
lives.
We have sleepless nights all together, and our health has been deteriorated. And by thinking that when can we see and get back our children.
10 years on, Sagrika's painful fight to have her children returned to her is being made into a movie starring Rani Mukherjee. Mrs. Chatterjee vs. Norway is set to release this week, 11 years after Sagrika's ordeal began. I discussed this case with my co host Mugda to understand how cultural differences cost a mother her children. I am Ankur, and you are listening to the News Park. Hi Mugda, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm good too. Thank you. So, Mugda, the case that we are discussing today is a bit complicated and maybe a little sensitive to some of our listeners, especially mothers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a serious case, which, to be honest, is not something new, because we do hear these types of cases. They've happened before as well.
hmm So, I've prepared a few questions about this case so that we can get a clear idea about what exactly happened and what do we learn from this case.
Yeah, why waste any time? Let's get started.
Sure. So, for starters, can you explain a little bit about this case, exactly what happened and when was it, and so on?
So, in 2007, a young Indian couple, Anurup Bhattacharya and Sagarika, moved to Norway from India to start their new life. The women gave birth to two children, and one of the children started showing autism like symptoms. The children were raised just like every Indian parent, but apparently that did not appeal to the Norway neighbors who complained to the child welfare authorities. The children then were placed in a foster care, and the authority decided that they would remain there until they reached the age of 18, with no permission granted for the couple to visit them. Can you even imagine how sad that is?
Yeah, that's very cruel to say the least. But you mentioned that their parenting style was questioned. Like, can you give some examples? What kind of style we are talking about here?
Yeah, so the couple used to feed their children through hands. So hand feeding was, not something that Norway people, consider as normal, you know.
But that is extremely normal in Indian culture. Indian parents feed their kids via hands all the time.
For Norwegians, it was something as force feeding. So that is something that did not appeal to them at all. And also breastfeeding. In Norway, you can only breastfeed up to a certain age, which might not be, according to what the Indian couple were doing. So they also questioned that. And another thing which, Indians can not even think about is the children sleeping in the same bed as their parents. Because in India, it's the family close and it's considered normal.
They told to me that why are you sleeping with your children in the same bed? And this is also a purely cultural issue that we never leave our children in another room and say good night.
So, how does this legal system work in Norway that they were able to take away kids from their parents? Like there are child protected services everywhere in the world. So these authorities have power to do what Norway did?
Well, yes, the laws are more or less the same in all the countries. But I'll say that yes, there is more exposure to the Indian culture in America, Canada. So, what might, be abnormal in Norway, for US and Canada, they might just see it as a cultural thing and would, probably not bother about it at all. But I can also say that laws are not perfect in these countries either. Like, for example, let's take a case in the US. Like, have you seen the movie I Do Care a Lot?
Yes, I have. I think in that movie, it's been shown that there are certain laws and agencies in US which exploit the fact of how you can take care of older people. So they
Yeah,
send older people to for care homes against their will and like confiscate their money and property.
exactly, right? So you see that laws are not perfect in US either.
Yeah. All right. So you said that it all started with the neighbors complaining about the parenting style. I mean, in some countries, the police would just not consider it as a serious request. They would just say that it's a family's personal matter. We will
Mhm.
only interfere if the child is in danger. So why do you
Yeah.
think Norway authorities were so quick to take action?
Because Norway has an extremely strict child protection system. They also have a strong history of blanket regulations for all citizens living in the country, irrespective of cultural differences. For example, in Norway, even a mild slap in the region is illegal. An anonymous tip is enough to send the authorities to your doorstep. And like, to make matters worse, you will be declared as an unfit parent and just have your child taken away from you, which is what we are discussing right now. This is what happened to Sagarika.
Mhm. So, can you explain what happened after the Norwegian authorities reached their house? So, what did they observe and what steps were taken?
Yeah, so Sagarika was, asked to sit for some counseling sessions because she was being termed as disorganized, unpunctual. She was not able to establish a proper routine for herself, for her family. So a counselor was assigned to her, and the lady officer used to come from the agency, and she used to come to the house and observe the couple. So she used to come at odd timings, when Sagarika was cooking or feeding the baby. She used to just sit there and look at them. And Sagarika was from Kolkata, right? So she did not speak Norwegian, so she couldn't speak to the counselor so much. But the counselor, surprisingly, never indicated that there was any problem. She never gave any warning, what she was writing in her notes. She just observed the couple and just made notes. And Sagarika could never imagine that she could do such a thing, that taking away her children. She was shocked about what happened to her.
Abhigyan and Aishwarya
They're the
is a
precious things, valuable
the
things in
father
our
and the
life.
mother can only understand means to be without their children, and how difficult it is for a breastfeeding mother to snatch the child from her
I delivered the
lap.
frozen milk to the Barneverne
And
office.
she has been delivering the frozen milk to the Barneverne office for the last 8 months, and this is just like a horrible condition. Our parents were here and they have seen that what the mother is going through, and she's her psychological and mental health is also getting depressed by seeing this. Thinking all the time and crying hours and hours in the kitchen and hours in the bathroom, that and the bed which is lying there, and we don't have our children, the toys are lying in our home.
Right. So, why did the parents agree to that counseling sessions? Like, why did they not protest?
Because there were so many complaints, from the children's school and the neighbors complaining. So the parents just thought, and they just thought that the counseling and observation part would be a good idea, and just for the sake of their son, they agreed to it. Well, they did make some, request for cancellation or rescheduling some home visits, because sometimes Sagarika would be just tired, not comfortable, and she said in the news that she just wanted to be alone on some days, and rest and sleep with the baby. But that was not possible. They just refused all their requests. They used to come there, constantly write notes, and they just never agreed to the couple's requests.
Got it. And there's a lot of articles being written about this case right now. It's back in news, and it's an
Oh
old,
yes.
it's not a new case. So, why do you think that is happening?
Oh, yeah, so this case is making news just because of a new Bollywood movie that has come. Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway, which basically discusses this topic only and touches upon the life of this family. And you know the actress, right?
It's Rani Mukherjee, right?
Yes. So yeah, she has a huge fan following, and that's why it's so much in news.
This couple here have been investigated for 10 weeks. Mrs. Chatterjee has an unstable mind. This court rejects Mrs. Chatterjee's petition. No. Both children will be wards of the state till they are 18 years old.
Bollywood is always known for making such movies. So what do you think about making Bollywood movies about sensitive topics like these? What's your opinion?
So I think there are two ways to look at it. On one side, yes, you should, keep such sensitive topics out of the entertainment arena because there are personal lives linked to it. There are actual people who are linked to these things. So I don't know how nicely you can justify making a story on that. But on the other hand, it's nice to have a platform for these stories so that people can be educated, people can learn from it so that they don't repeat the same mistakes. So I think it's a nice move to make a movie, but you have to consider the feelings of the family or the people associated with it.
I completely agree with you. That's a very bold step on the part of the director, to touch upon such a sensitive topic because it is affecting so many lives.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about the movies, right? What about the Indian government? Can you tell me how did they help their family? Did they or not?
Yeah, of course, when the couple started this legal battle in Norway, they were still Indian citizens. So, of course, Indian government was involved. What I've read is that Indian government had a diplomatic agreement with the Norway government, stating that the kids will be will reside with the father's brothers. That means their uncle, and they'll come back to India. So that was the terms that they agreed upon. However, when they were back in India, Sagarika filed a case in Kolkata High Court seeking the custody of the kids, which was later approved. So the kids were given to the mother. But as far as I read, Norway was not too happy about it. But I think everything happened in India under their jurisdiction. So I don't think so they could do anything about it.
4 months later, I'm just today is the day that I will meet with my children, and it's really very much today. I am really very much happy, and I know that it's a big ordeal in my life. My parents and me fighting a long time, so it's a really. I'm really very glad that I meet with my children.
Yeah, and I also know that, the parents were not on good terms at that time. They were living separately because, with so much of problems in their lives, they were not together.
Right.
And that's why, yeah.
So, Mugdha, there are a lot of Indian people living abroad. What should they learn from this case?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very good question, What I feel is like, first of all, you should always try to understand and make efforts understanding the laws about the country you are moving to. Try to understand their culture and don't be rigid, be open to adopt to nicer things, right? I think that's very important.
I agree. So, what, according to you, would be some cultural differences from the West that might not appeal to the Indian parents?
There are many that I can think of. For instance, in India, children are raised in the same house as their grandparents. So, when a grandmother tells her grandchild to get her, for example, glasses, no matter what the child is doing, he will get up and get it for her. But in the West, the grandchild might, just refuse and say, please get it yourself. I'm busy right now. Now, this is considered absolutely normal in the West. But in India, I cannot just, the Indian authorities cannot just arrest the grandchild for not taking proper care of the grandparents. So, what I'm trying to say is that there are cultural differences everywhere, and child protection laws should be designed keeping those in mind.
Right. I absolutely agree. And that's a great example. So,
Yes. So these cultural differences are there, they exist everywhere. I can give you so many examples. Like, can you think of something?
Yeah, actually, I have some of these examples on top of my head. So I know for a fact that most Chinese parents emphasize academic skills above all other skills, including interpersonal skills. So Chinese children tend to perform well in schools and have a strong drive to gain higher grades, because doing so would please their parents. The
Right.
Chinese parents' desire to see their kid perform well in school often is related to their hope for child's success at an older age.
Yeah, and I guess that's the same in India. I mean, there's too much focus on academic success, and statistics have proven that Indian and Chinese students do perform better in academics. But for the Western countries, I guess, they might just see it as parents forcing their children to study all the time and taking away their precious years of childhood.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
agree.
that's something, different.
Mhm. So after discussing this story, Mugdha, what is your take on the parenting style in different countries?
Since laws are made for the residents, it should also be modified according to the diversity, culture, background of its people. And I'm not saying that parenting style cannot change. There are good and not so good ways about raising children from each culture. But it does not mean that it is wrong.
Right, you're absolutely right. For example, in India, the profile of a father is changing, which is inspired from the West. The traditional profile of a father is still that dad works all day, comes home, and spends few hours playing with the kid at night before having dinner and heading off to bed. It is
Mhm.
generally believed that the caring and raising of children is best left to women. However, the millennium age dads in India are changing and challenging this tradition.
Yes, exactly. So that's a good thing. We can, the Indian culture can adopt from the West. Like
Mhm.
fathers are stepping in to be real caretakers for the children, and they're doing very well. Research has also shown that active fathers who help in caring and raising their child create a healthier and strong marriage, and their children are well balanced as well.
I agree. Mugdha, my last question to you, as a woman, how do you feel about this case study?
A mother should be able to control, how she wants to raise her child. That's very important and a very basic need. Imagine Sagarika was questioned on raising her own child. She was crying, she was shouting because her child was taken away from her. And because of the shouting and all, she was termed as being hysterical, and that was she it was taken as a proof against her for her unsuitability as a mother. So her basic right as a woman of being a mother and raising the child in the way she wanted to was taken away. And I think that is very disappointing. It should not happen to any woman.
hmm That's a really valid point. Thank you so much, Mugdha, for sharing your views and explaining about this case. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
In 2012 interview, a beaming Sagarika said, "I have finally got my children back. My ordeal is over. Finally, I'm getting justice." Over a decade later, Sagarika's stories is finding its way into the mainstream after years of having been forgotten. There are a lot of learnings we can get from this case, particularly how the world still is heavily divided in its cultural differences. Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway is said to be an untold story about a journey of a mother's battle against an entire country. Sagrika, who had once gone 18 months without seeing her children, now lives in a low key and peaceful life with her kids in Kolkata. Thank you for listening. See you next time.